being here.
Yeah, my pleasure to be back. Thanks for having me, Kim.
Yeah, you're one of the best. I mean, honestly, which the audience already knows you're highly requested. So I'm glad to have you back. Let's get into some of your latest investigation, the border. This is what's interesting about the border is typically in election cycles, the number one priority for American voters is the economy. But this one time, the border actually rises above in the polls as a greater concern for many Americans than even the economy itself. We're told we have an invasion going on. I'm seeing reports all the time of it's 40,000 Chinese nationals have been able to cross the
hmm
border, right? So there's
hmm
this rhetoric that's building of there's this invasion and almost like these military aged young men are going to come in and stage a coup and take over our country. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what the line of logic where it's supposed to lead to, but I think it kind of is supposed to allude to that.
Yeah.
Um,
hmm
but you say that the border fiasco or the porous border is that this is intentionally produced, that they've never fixed this on purpose, administration after
hmm
administration.
hmm
Tell us about that. Like, why do you think
Yeah.
it's been done on purpose?
Well, absolutely. So, if you think about the migrant situation or like the illegal immigration phenomenon and its uptick over the past several decades, it's been continuously bad and problematic, and the border has been continuously porous. And it's never been closed by anybody, Trump included. When he was in office. And when Trump was in office, of course, his campaign, his first presidential campaign, rested heavily on the idea of creating a physical barrier on the U.S.
Hmm.
Mexico border. But by 2019, Trump had abandoned that idea and was promoting this smart wall. The biometric, an artificial intelligence powered smart wall that functions autonomously. And this is actually something that the Bush administration first kicked off. The newly created Department of Homeland Security at the time launched this program called SBI Net. Um, which failed and has sort of come back over the last several years or so and has been promoted both by Democrats and Republicans. So, for example, when Trump was his rhetoric about a physical barrier was being, Democrats were upset about it. Their response by and large was to promote the idea of a smart wall as opposed to a physical barrier. And this is a bipartisan agenda, and it's been creeping along the past several years rather quickly. And now, of course, what you have is, as you mentioned, this rhetoric, this renewed media attention, including an independent media being given to the border situation, which, of course, is going to get people more agitated and concerned about it. But it is something that has gone on for a long time. And I would argue that the media rhetoric about the problematic situation on the border is to argue, it is to, like you said, frame it in military style terms, with the idea of manufacturing consent for a military style solution.
A
And
military style solution that would end up being this kind of biometric surveillance system that would then I would imagine then they're going to turn around and use it on everybody. I mean, that's usually how
yes.
that goes, right?
Well, here's the thing about the biometric entry exit wall. This is something that is not just happening in the US, it is being rolled out and promoted in lockstep throughout the entire Western world. The European Union is implementing it starting this year. The UK is poised to do it in 2025. And it is essentially part of this broader agenda to impose digital identity or digital ID on people. And digital ID is something that a lot of people in Trump's base and people that were dissenters during the COVID era were very opposed to, because this was, vaccine passports were fundamentally the trial run for a global interoperable digital ID style system. And
Mhm.
that's essentially what these entry exit systems will be. And it's not something that's just they're trying to do on the physical terrestrial borders of the US. All ports of entry, including airports, are going to have this, or they're hoping to impose this on people. This new paradigm for identification for travel. And obviously, as was reported during, the COVID era with the vaccine passports, the goal is not just surveillance, but restricting people's freedom of movement on, in the case of vaccines, whether or not you've been vaccinated. But that, of course, opens the door to anything, potentially even, your social media posts or your online activity, your travel should be restricted, or from the the net zero carbon market side of things. If you've if you've spent too much, you've traveled too much this year and your carbon footprint's too big, your travel's being restricted and all of that. All of that functionality is currently being marketed to the exact segment of the population that was against it during COVID, and they're trying to frame it with rhetoric, and with crises where they think they'll consent to this system, because obviously the digital ID system only works if there's mass compliance to it.
Oh, this is so frightening. So the very people, those of us who are very much against vaccine passports and mandates, but mostly the passport, because the passport created the mandate. I mean, you could skirt a mandate potentially, if, especially here in this country, it was like the paper. You just got the paper from the doctor if you got a vaccine, and those were easily faked, or people just say, "Oh, I lost mine, I had it," right? But when it comes to a digital COVID passport, then you wouldn't be able to go, there would be no way to really fake it very easily, right? It would be on your
Yeah.
digital ID, and that would allow, and then they could say to you, well, we're not allowing you on any public transportation. We're not allowing you to travel. We're not allowing you into the movie theater or to these restaurants, because when we scan your digital ID, you don't have proof of vaccination, right?
Exactly.
So
The
a lot of
man
us were very not okay with that. But what you're saying, and this is so scary and interesting, that now with this, but the border is more of a right wing, that the very people who are against those vaccine passports are often the same people who are very concerned about all of, like, the Chinese nationals coming in through the
Mhm.
border and the invasion at the border. And so you're saying that the way they're going to enact this, it's not just like, because when I think of a border biometric security wall, I kind of think, are they just going to put a bunch of cameras up? I mean, what are they going to? I don't even, what, I don't understand the tech that they plan to implement. I'm sure you do better than I do, but you're saying that part of that would be this kind of digital ID that's created. They would be able to then sell to the public, look, we've got to keep America safe.
Oh, absolutely. And that's how they're going to sell it to the right. And they're also going to sell it sort of as a private sector initiative as opposed to a public sector initiative. But remember, all of this stuff, the digital ID agenda included, is a public private partnership. ID
Right.
2020 and those groups, that's how they function. It's a public private partnership. And so the public sector leaning rhetoric appeals to the left, private sector leaning rhetoric appeals to the right. And the other ways they're going to try and pitch this to the right, and they're already doing it, is not just through increased border security, but as an answer to the voter ID issue. Vote with your
Right.
face. And this is already being promoted by people like Trump's lawyer, Alina Habba, and people like that on the podcast circuit, saying, why don't we have Clear being like the company at airports alongside TSA, where you can scan your eyeball, not unlike WorldCoin, and get through security faster. She was like, why not do that for voting? This is the beginning of them trying to manufacture consent to Trump's base, or rather right-leaning populists, for the same exact digital ID system that they were opposed to during COVID. Because
Clever.
it's very clever. And this is why I would encourage people to look at the current border situation as something that is being intentionally manufactured also by the Biden administration, because this is something where the Biden camp and the Trump camp agree. And precisely this intentional policy on the part of Biden's DHS is creating the situation whereby the solution that both parties want can be imposed, but the opposition, in this case, Trump, can ride in and offer this solution, and his base will be clamoring for it, even though it's
Ah.
the exact same type of framework that was proposed during COVID. And of course, as you pointed out, the mandates were to force people to onboard onto this. So if you can't vote without digital ID, you can't get a job without digital ID. You have to prove you're an American citizen, right? Not a migrant. But the only way to do that now is with smart ID, just like the kind that Ron DeSantis, who was, opposed to all this COVID era stuff, he's already having that roll out in Florida, called exactly Florida Smart ID. And it's being produced by a World Economic Forum strategic partner based in France, Thales. So, I mean, regardless of their rhetoric, we need to pay attention to their actions. And both parties are leading us to this technocratic system. You just have some where it's being framed as a UN public sector effort, and then the ones where it's being framed by private sector Silicon Valley oligarchs like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, who are building the same exact kind of systems for the quote unquote deep state that Trump supporters are supposed to revile. And it's precisely a Peter Thiel funded company that's building the smart wall right now. And there's a lot to be said about that, because the amount of connections to the CIA in that regard are truly
Mhm.
staggering. And so, if Trump supporters knew that they're being tricked into supporting a CIA, front company border wall as a way to stop migration, that's not just about keeping migrants out. That's also about, intimately tied up with the war on domestic terror agenda, which I think a lot of these people should know by now is directed mainly at them. And a lot of the groundwork for that war on domestic terror, that's aimed largely at constitutional conservatives, but really also people that would be most likely to protest against government overreach. It says in the documentation that it's just about not just about targeting people on the right, but people on the left as well, if they get in the way of government policy. This system being built by Peter Thiel through Palantir and some of these other companies that are, military and intelligence contractors. The groundwork was set under Trump. It's been expanded under Biden. This is a two-party agenda to curb domestic dissent, and they have been building it for a very long time. Obviously, supercharged after 9/11. But they're essentially being, sheepdogged into a situation where they're cheering on their own prosecution.
Oh man, I don't know what I'm more afraid of. I don't know if I'm afraid that these people are this smart that they're able to manipulate population so easily. Just it's kind of just pick their soft point, right? With the left, it was COVID. They were worried about killing grandma. They wanted everybody to have these digital IDs, essentially these COVID passports to stay safe, right? It's always under the guise of we got to stay safe. And then they realized a bunch of people weren't going to fall for this. They weren't falling for it. So they said, oh, well, we'll find the thing that they can fall for. They will fall for the border. They'll fall for
Hmm.
voter ID.
Hmm.
I don't know if I'm more afraid that they're this intelligent that they're able to suss that out, or if we're that dumb, if we're if we're so that we just keep falling for things over and over and over again. Hey guys, thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson show, which you could catch just by heading to that link down below, KimIversonShow.com. You can watch the full show from what you just watched, or you could catch the full show live Monday through Friday, live streams, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. See you then. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Never miss an episode. Never miss a clip. Never miss a segment. Thanks, guys.